Hey, what's up? It's Václav here. In the last video, I showed you how I modified my Windows covers so I can control them from Home Assistant. In this video, I'm gonna walk you through the automations, how I automate them, what I do with them. Now, I have two types of covers, two types of scenarios. One is in the bedrooms and one is in the open space in the corridor. And I control them based on four types of events. One is essentially the sunrise or sunset, where I shut the covers down, and I do that both in the bedroom as well as in the corridor. And I'll show you how easy it is. That's the most simple one. Then I control them based on the time, and I do that mainly in the bedroom. I could have configured simple automation in Home Assistant, a specific time, set it to specific position. But I wanted to do it a little bit more sophisticated and made it a bit more flexible. So what I have done is I made an integration with Google Calendar. And in Google Calendar, I can schedule a meeting where I say, this is the cover I'd like to set. This is the position I'd like to set it to. And there's a little bit more intelligent in that as well. And I'm going to show you that, and it's a very simple, very easy, anyone can use it. Just reschedule meeting from your calendar and you will reprogram the cover. Even my wife can do that, so it's very simple. Then there's the most complex, most sophisticated automation, which I use in the open space, and this is where I can set the position and tilt of the blades based on the elevation of the sun, based on the temperature inside, and based on the weather, whether it's sunny or not. And I do that with AppDaemon. I will share this automation with you, and so you can reuse it or take inspiration in it. And then finally, I can control them manually, either from the Home Assistant screen or using Google Home. You can just by voice control them and say, set the position of those covers to that. Now, before I show that to you, there's one thing I want to talk about. I've mentioned that I do one in AppDaemon, the other one I do in YAML. I have been using Home Assistant for 2 years now, and it's been an evolution, it's been a journey. I have started very simple by automating one light, and I started using a Raspberry Pi, very simple, very basic. And it evolved over the time. I am now automating pretty much everything I could in my house. And it keeps evolving because I like that. It's my hobby. And I've also moved from Raspberry Pi into a HAS.io into a Docker running under Linux on a laptop. And I did that because I was buying a new laptop for my wife, and I had the old one, so I could just use that. So I installed Linux on it and Docker, and I could run it there, which gave me some more options to do things which I couldn't do in Raspberry Pi because the notebook is more powerful. Said that, it doesn't mean that if I do something in a certain way that, and you don't have that, you don't do that, it doesn't mean that you can't do the same thing. Like, for example, I have started with most of those automations as a simple YAML automation, and as I started developing integrations in Python, and I was learning Python myself, I felt it was kind of cool to convert some of the automations into Python script or AppDaemon. And over time, I actually find it's simpler if on later stages I went to the script and I wanted to modify it. The automation in YAML was becoming a little bit cumbersome, and it was difficult to change that, to understand what I'm doing, when I'm doing what. And in the Python, it was kind of simpler. So I ended where I am, but if you want to do it in, I don't know, Node-RED or simple YAML, you can, with some limitations, probably do that as well. So with this out of the way, let's go and let's see how I configured the covers to be used in Home Assistant. I use simple MQTT automation. So you have seen the firmware I wrote, it's using MQTT. So the way how they're configured is I have cover, which is platform MQTT, and for each of those covers Here I configure the topics for opening, closing, setting positions. And for the ones which are in the open space, I also have topics to tilt them. So it's very simple, standard MQTT cover configuration. Now you see it, how it's easy, so you can do it as well. Now how about the automations? The simplest automation I do is on the sunset, I close the covers. So when the sun is sunset, and I have the input booleans here that I have defined here on top, where from the Home Assistant screen I can turn on or turn off the automations. And I could have just turned off and on the actual automations, but sometimes I use input boolean because then based on that I could control multiple events. So for example, in here, if I say I want to turn off automations for those covers, I not only disable the automation for shutting down the covers on the sunset, but I also disable for this particular cover the automation based on the time in Google Calendar. So I have one switch which controls them all. So there is the condition. So unless the state is on, I will not do that. And then there is the action. I set position of, in this case, 2 covers to 0. So I'll close them down. And then I'm waiting 1.5 minutes just in case, because it takes some time for the cover to lower down in case it was open. And then I'm setting the tilt to 90 degrees, so I'm tilting them down, and then I'm just making a note in the logbook. For the bedroom, I do essentially the same. So this is the calendar I'm going to talk about in a second, but here there is the automation that on sunset, again checking the master switch, and I'm setting the cover position, but I don't set it to 0. I don't fully close it, but I leave those slits, those vents open. So I figured it's about 17%. So I'm closing them, I'm leaving 17% open, which leaves those vents in, so we get some air in. But I could easily change that. So that was rather simple, wasn't it? Let's look at the second and a slightly more complicated case. Using schedule configured in Google Calendar. So I have a Google account, and there I have obviously Gmail and Google Calendar. And in there I have created a new calendar dedicated to controlling shutters. So this is the calendar. And in here I have meetings which they have in the subject name of the shutter that is controlled. And in the body I have the position to be set. And in this case, there is minus in front of the number, and I'll explain you in a second what it is. Then I have another room where I have 2 numbers, because this room has 2 shutters and I can control both of those. Now, this was the setup in Google Calendar. By the way, I use the same thing for garden irrigation, for example. But let's now go to Home Assistant and see how I configure the integration with this calendar so I can trigger automations by that. For that, I'm using the standard Google Calendar integration. You can check the documentation, how it's done. You will need to go to the Google Development Console and created the client ID and secret and configure it like that. So this is what I have in my config. So there is in my configuration.yaml, I have Google integration with client ID and client secret. Now, what it will do is it will create a bunch of sensors. So here you have the sensors calendar for each of the shutters. So there is one for Jacob, one for Clara, one for the bedroom, and they are currently off because there is no meeting in progress. And when the meeting starts, the state will turn to on, which will trigger my automation. And there is a bunch of attributes that I read, namely the description where I have the position of the blades. So what I do in my automation in here, I would have automation that is triggered by the state of the calendar bedroom when it turns to on. Then I'm checking the master switch again to make it easier to disable the automations without the need to go and delete the particular event from the Google Calendar. And then I have the action. I could have simply called the service to set it to the position based on the state in the description. But I wanted to do something a little bit more sophisticated. So what I did is I created a Python script for adjusting the cover positions. Now, what a script will do is it will take the description of the event, and from there it will read the target position of the shades. Now, for the bedrooms where I have 2 covers, I allow to have 2 numbers separated by comma, 1 for each cover. And I did one more thing, which is maybe a little bit over the top, but I allowed to put minus or plus sign in front of the number. And what it does is the plus sign will only change the position of the blade to increase it, and the minus will only change it to decrease it. So if the position of the cover is already more than what the script was supposed to do, it won't change it. And the reason I do it is if I wake up earlier and if I, for example, fully open the cover, I don't want the script to bring it back down to the program position. I want to leave it there. I want the script only to bring it to, let's say, 50%, but if it's more, just leave it where it is. So this is what the script does. I'm not gonna go through it line by line, but essentially it has a part for the minus sign, it has the part for plus sign, and it has the part for the without any sign at all. And it just calls the service, set cover position, and create even in the log. So it's very simple. I'm gonna share this script with you so you could reuse that. Now let's look at the third one, which is most sophisticated. For that I'm using AppDaemon. So let me show you how to get AppDaemon and how to use that. I'm using Has.io, so what I can do is I go to the supervisor, I go to the add-on store, and in here I just search for the AppDaemon. So I have it already installed. There's an AppDaemon 4, which I'd like to use, but currently I'm also using it for supporting Dialogflow, and it doesn't work currently in AppDaemon 4. I'm waiting for the new version, so I'm still using the AppDaemon 3. So you just install it. There is basically not much configuration to do. The only thing I do is I'm using Voluptuous package to check the configuration, so you need to add it in there, and datetime, even though I'm not sure you have to put this one in because it's part of Python. And then you could see there is the log where I am getting the logs from the different covers as it's adjusting the position. So it's very simple, you just installed AppDaemon. And then what you have to do is in your Visual Studio, there is a folder AppDaemon, and in there you have the apps. Each of them has a folder, so I have one for the adjusting covers, and this script is available for you on my GitHub, so I will provide you with the link and you can just download it from there and use it. And it's configured in the apps.yaml, so in here you register all the AppDaemon applications. And the way I did it is I allowed to configure number of parameters in here. Some of them are optional. So here is the sensor for the outside temperature. So here you will enter the entity ID of the sensor you have for the outside temperature, if you have one. Then I have one that controls my heating. And what it does is if the heating is on, so I'm using gas to heat the house. And if it's cold inside, so normally the heating would be on. But if it's sunny outside and the sun is on the side where the covers are, then it will actually open the shades. So it will heat up the interior to save on the gas bill. And if the heating is off, it won't do that in the summer. If I don't configure this parameter, it will just look at the temperature outside and it will assume if it's winter or summer based on the outside temperature. So if it's less than, I don't know, 10 degrees, it will think it's winter and it will do essentially the same thing. So you don't have to have the heating integration to do that. Then I have the weather, which is basically looking at whether it's sunny or cloudy, and based on that it will control the tilt of the blades. And then I have configuration for the individual covers, so I have two in here. And here I have just the entity ID of the cover. I have the master switch for that cover, so it's here as well. I have the temperature sensor in that room for the controlling based on the internal temperature. And then I can have a time from when till when the automation works. That could be start at and stop at. I'm actually gonna show it to you in here. So you have more parameters. You could set up also the minimal and maximal azimuth of the sun. So based on the position of the sun, you can control on which part of the house it is. You can set whether it's tilting or not. If it's not tilting, it will just lower the position of the shades and raise it. And then there is the formula, which has two parameters. I figured this could be very easily approximated linearly. So there is a intercept position, and then there is the slope, so how quickly it reacts on the elevation of the sun. And I did it by experimenting, and there is some default values that work for my blade, so you don't have to configure them, but you could if you would like to adjust it. So these are the parameters, and this is the automation. Again, I'm not gonna go into detail, but what it does is it will essentially there is different functions that determine whether it's sunny or not based on the weather. It will determine whether it's winter or not. If I have the heating configured, that it will take it from there. If there is no heating configured, it will take it based on the temperature. And here I am updating the covers, and this is probably the heart of the whole automation. What it does is it will set the mode for the cover based on those parameters. So if the sun is below horizon, it will keep them shut. If the sun is not on the side of the house, so if the azimuth is less than the minimum or more than the maximum, it will just keep them open because there is no sun to block. If it's winter and the temperature is lower in the house, then it will open them to heat the house. I talked to you about this. And if it's tilting, then it will do the variable tilting, so they will adjust the angle. And if it's not tilting, it will just shut them down. If it's sunny, it will block the sun. So it's simple as that. And then there is the algorithm that calculates the position based on those parameters. And here is the formula using those parameters. I have provided the link to my GitHub repository where you can find this script in the description of this video. So you can go in there and download it. It's in here in the AppDaemon apps adjust covers. So you can download those two. It's very simple. You either click on it and copy it, or what you could do is in here on GitHub, you can say clone or download as a zip file, and it will download this whole repository as a zip file to your PC, and you can check it out. So if you like, you can get it from the GitHub and you could use that, or you can just check it out and take an inspiration from it. I think I made it so it's pretty simple and straightforward. If you do some programming, you can do some more fancy stuff. And if you do, please let me know, because I'll be interested in that. Finally, I can control them manually from the Lovelace interface. So each cover has an entity in here, which I can control, position and the tilt, and I can set them up and down. So it's pretty straightforward. One of the things I was struggling with and which I didn't like was, by default, the way how Home Assistant works is for all of those covers, it's set up so when something is closed, it's 0, it's on position 0, and when it gets open, it's on position 100 and something in between as well, right? So that's how it works logically. Now, I've been trying to use that, but for me, it's very hard to get used to it, because what I like to do is I like this slider to sort of represent the position of the cover. So if the slider is all the way to the right, it means that the cover is rolled all the way down, which means that the cover is closed, which kind of makes no sense technically, because I'm having close position on position 100. And if I roll it in, so there is no cover whatsoever, then it's basically in the position open, because the cover is open, light can go through. So it's kind of a little bit confusing, but so the standard position of the cover, if I call it 100, actually the physical position is 0, if you know what I mean. So for that, what I did is I created those custom sliders. Let me show you how it's done. I have recently, and by recently I mean yesterday, migrated from YAML into the visual configuration of the user interface. So I can edit it and show it to you now. So what I have here is I have those covers where I use the cover element, that's for those 2 buttons. And then I have a cover slider entity row, which is basically this custom entity where I have a custom slider which I use. And for the gallery, I have 2. So I have the custom cover element, and then I have 2 sliders, one for the position and one for the tilt. So this is how I visualize them. And then I have them integrated with Google Assistant, so I can control them by voice. And for that, I am paying for the Nabukasa integration. And in here, if I do that, it's very simple. There is a Google Assistant integration, and I can manage which entities I would like to control by the Google Assistant. So it's done automatically. I don't have to do it myself. Previously, I've tried to do it myself, but first of all, it was a little bit complicated. And the other thing is, I wanted to support the Nabukasa project, because I believe those guys are doing a great job. So I thought, you know, I'm paying Spotify, I'm paying Netflix, I'm paying HBO. Why not pay Home Assistant as well? Because it's helping me a lot. So this is my way of supporting the project as well. So this is how it's done. I have my lights, my covers. There is a couple of other entities, but I don't want to control them, so I can turn them on and off, and they will automatically synchronize with Google Assistant. So that's it. I hope you liked that. I've tried to keep it brief. I have this dilemma that it's getting a little bit too technical and specific, so I don't want to go too much into detail to make it watchable by general audience. But on the other hand, in the comments, you often have very detailed and specific questions. And if you do so, please leave them there. And I will try to explain them, or if it's more complicated, then I might actually create one more video where I'm going to answer your questions. All right? So take care, stay safe with the coronavirus situation, and I'll catch you up next time. Bye.